shoot the cannon. Oh, this is road.
Well, here you go.
Here we go.
Start with this guy.
Watch.
We are going to begin with the Revolutionary War and go through the history of the
Watch, I know he's going to shoot this gun.
Where? How far is it going to go?
You guys on the end may want to come up here. What are the Patriots? Revolutionary War begins in 1775 with the attack by American rebels against a British force that moved into Lexington and Concord near Boston. Now, that war was often talking about the Revolutionary War in the southern backcountry. This was an area that extended from about 50 miles from the Atlantic coast into about 50 miles into what is modern-day East Tennessee. A lot, quite literally hundreds of skirmishes fought in the Revolutionary War southern backcountry, primarily neighbor versus neighbor, because believe it or not, we did not get all on board with the rebellion. A lot of people wanted to remain loyal to the crown. There's a lot of fighting going on between the Patriots and what would become known as the Loyalists. There would be a number of pitched battles fought in the southern backcountry: Kings Mountain, the Battle of Calvin, Military Courthouse, 1906, Camden. The list goes on and on and on. Primarily fought again in the Carolinas, Virginia, and even into modern-day East Tennessee. There's a battle fought in East Tennessee called the Battle of Long Island Flats, near modern-day Kingsport, Tennessee, which is fought against another foe, which would actually be the Cherokee Indians, who had allied themselves with the British. Now, one of the most popular myths of the American Revolution is that the way we win because of American rifle power and using the American rifle. And while indeed it did play a role, the major battles are actually won by adopting European tactics, that is, using smoothbore muskets and bayonet charges. The weapon I'm carrying is the first model British brown vest musket. It is a 75 caliber smoothbore musket. They are all flintlock ignition systems in this time period. To load this weapon, we're reaching to the cartridge box, carrying 8 rounds of ammunition. There are cubes of paper rolled together, which, if this was a live round, would contain a 75 caliber round ball and as well as about 100 grains of black powder. You would place this in the mouth, rip it open, put a charge of powder in the pan, close the pan, reverse the weapon, pour the remaining powder down the barrel, and then pull the ramrod, force the whole thing down the barrel. Make ready, aim, and fire. Would fire as a unit.
Out your ears.
Make ready. Take aim. Fire.
That's cool.
Thank you. Remember us on the 4th of July. Okay. Halt. Hold up. At rest. Okay, you learned about the American Revolution. That war was fought in the American colonies against the British Empire. A few years later, we find ourselves in conflict with that same empire once again. It's called the War of 1812. Now, the British are fighting against us with that same musket that you just saw, the brown vest. At this point, the United States is armed with the Shilioh 1766, which is a French musket, or the American-made Springfield 1795, both of which are basically an identical weapon. They both fire the same method as the brown vest. It's a flint and steel flintlock, loads from a paper cartridge. See, I have the bayonet affixed. That bayonet is an intimidation weapon. It can be used hand to hand, but most of the time that is to make your army, your troops look larger. See, it makes me look taller. It's also when you see that coming down the line at you, that shiny steel, who wants to stand in front of that? I don't. It makes the opposing force want to run off the field. If you run them off the field, you effectively won the battle. It's not about who kills the most soldiers. It's who can run the other enemy, the other force off the field. I'm going to remove the bayonet, because we don't fire it with the bayonet. It could be fired, and it was fired, but we don't want to risk that, something flying out the end when we fire the blank. So again, it's going to load and fire the same manner, same procedure as what you saw from the brown bag. The difference I'm going to show you now is that at this point, I'm dressed as a regular infantryman of the United States Army. This is not the Continental Army. This is our first step of having a tried and true, trained and experienced army. So we have a regulated uniform, we have regulated equipment, we have the same thing. Everyone's dressed the same. We wear these tall leather Shilioh hats. This is a Napoleonic era tradition. And what the idea is by having a tall hat, you look taller, kind of like the bayonet. Well, when you take your army out on the field, and you had people of all different heights, you put tall hats on the short people, and the short hats on the tall people, and make everyone look the same. So you look like you're more disciplined and more formidable because you're all the same size. It's all mind games. That's what this rank and file, standing shoulder to shoulder and firing at another group of men standing shoulder to shoulder, that's what it's about. It's about a game. It's like a chess game. Run them off the field. So what we have developed this time is we actually fire by command, and we're a little more regimented and a little more disciplined when we fire on line. Now we're standing shoulder to shoulder, and the guy to my right and the guy to my left, our shoulders are actually touching. So you notice when I do my drill, my feet can't move very far. Because if I step back, I've just stepped on someone's toes because they're standing right behind me. So you just watch my feet as I do my drill. You'll see that my feet move in a very small circle and never go beyond that. And that's the reason, because imagine that I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with many, many men. It could be thousands of men standing together. So I'm going to give commands. Now ordinarily I would have a platoon sergeant that would be giving these commands. It's going to look funny, me talking and doing this, but just imagine he's standing over here with a saber and he's giving commands to all the troops. And everything we do is by command. So when you hear, I'm going to give this command of, by word, prime and load. When the soldier hears by word, it means do everything I tell you, don't get ahead of me, and don't skip anything, because if you skip or get ahead, you're going to be out of sync with everyone else at the least, and at the most, your weapon's not going to fire, or you're going to have a catastrophic failure. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load facing towards you so you can see everything I'm doing, then I'm going to about face and fire. But I'll do everything by command. Platoon, trunk, shoulder, arm. By word, prime, and load. Handle, cartridge. I slap the cartridge box to settle the powder out of the neck of this cartridge. That way I don't bite off a mouthful of powder. I hold the cartridge under my chin. That's so my platoon sergeant knows that I followed his command and I'm ready for the next command, and also protects it from wind and rain. Prime. I prime the pan. I cover it, again, protect it from wind and rain. Shut pan. Shut the pan, cast the weapon about. Charge, cartridge. I pour the powder and dump the cartridge down the bore. Draw the rammer. Ram! Return, rammer! At the return rammer command, I will come back to the shoulder arms position, and my platoon sergeant sees that everyone is ready and prepared. To the left, about face. Platoon, make ready. Hey, aim. Fire!
That scared me.
At that point, I might be given additional commands to prime and load and for fastest time. At that point, I would prime and load without waiting for command. That would be in the heat of battle.
At this point, I will conclude and let the next one come forward.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see all of you here today. We appreciate you coming out. My name is Randy Brown. I'm representing the citizen soldier of the War with Mexico, 1846 to 1848. A largely forgotten war. Why? Because a lot of people mistake this war for the Texas War of Independence, which happened 10 years prior to this war, and also it's basically overshadowed by the fact that this country fought a civil war 13 years after this war was fought. So what's the significance of this war? Well, three significant facts about this war were that, number one, as a result of this war with Mexico, the country was expanded by fully 1/3 of its territory as a result of the cessions made after this war. All of the territory that we know today as California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, part of Colorado and Wyoming were all gained as a result of this war and the signing of the peace treaty with Mexico. Number two, another important aspect of this war was the fact that most of the junior officers that were engaged in this war with Mexico went on to become generals, brigadier generals, and major generals during the Civil War, the War between the states. If you do a roll call of junior officers of this war, you are basically naming every major significant person that was involved in the Civil War 13 years later. Names like Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, Tecumseh Sherman, P.G.T. Beauregard, William Hardy, McClellan, the list goes on and on and on. All of these gentlemen were junior officers during the war with Mexico. Now, the war with Mexico was probably would have been a war basically the same as the Civil War. It could have been avoided if people had not had such a hostile mode toward each other. In 1845, 10 years after Texas gained its independence and became its own republic, they petitioned the United States Congress to be annexed into the Union. And this infuriated Mexico. Relations broke down, and then a year later, troops were moved into the southern territory of Texas, and Mexico said this was an act of aggression. They sent troops across the Rio Grande and attacked the U.S. forces just outside of Matamoros, Mexico. 14 United States soldiers were killed, and at that point, war was on. Congress declared war a couple of weeks later, and so basically a 2-year battle was fought to determine the territory of Texas and also the New Mexico and California boundaries. 15,000 Mexicans lost their lives during that war. Probably about 500 or 600 Americans lost their lives during that war. Mexico was offered $30 million for the territory that the United States gave 2 years prior. They ended up paying $15 million for the same territory plus all of the other cessions that were gained. So 15,000 Mexicans lost their lives when it probably could have been obtained without any sort of bloodshed. A real tragedy. Third significant point about the Mexican War is that the flintlock system that you've seen being fired in the previous two demonstrations was superseded by the percussion system of firing a weapon. This was an extreme improvement in the way a weapon was fired. Not only could you keep the powder dry, but also it eliminated a couple of steps in the flintlock firing procedure. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate the percussion firing system. Loaded 9 times was not probably a loaded 10 times. Basically, I'll go through it step by step. Attention, company, load. When the order was given to load, the musket was brought to the left side. Reach to handle the cartridge just like in previous demonstrations, except that there was no timing. During this step as there would be before. Cartridge was torn in the same manner. The musket was charged. Projectile was pressed in. Same muzzle loading system. Cartridge was rammed. Rammer returned. then I will do an about face.
He's getting ready to shoot it, Hunter.
Then the musket was brought up to here and then brought to half cock. And a percussion cap, which contains filament of mercury, was placed on this nipple. If any of you have ever fired a cap gun when you were youngsters, some of you may still have fired some cap guns. It's the same system.
Watch, Hunter.
The same thing as if you were firing a cap pistol today. Then the musket would be brought to ready and I'll be doing about face to be that. About face on the ready.
There you go, stuff for years.
Aim. So basically, the same system except you're eliminating the flintlock system where it had to be primed and was primed on the average. This was a much more efficient system because it eliminated steps and it also allowed you to keep the powder dry, whereas on an inclement weather day, the flintlock system might not be effective. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming out to Shilioh. I am a
Western
Confederate, and my friend here is a Western Federal nasty. Anyway, all right, I'll go back to what I was saying. The last fella, he had a smoothbore musket. Same thing he's carrying right here, carrying what his granddaddy carried. And right here is the infield rifled musket. It's not smooth on the inside. It's got rifling. The new technology by Claude Monet, the mini ball, that just come out, made for a better shot, went further and more accurately. Right now, he's going to load just like the last fella did. Load! He's reaching around his cartridge box. He's going to grab a round out, bite it with his teeth, spit that out, try not to get too much black powder in his mouth. Pulling out his ramrod, ramming it down. He's going to bring the rifle up to his hip. He's going to grab a percussion cap out of his cap box. Looks just like a top hat. Got a filament on the inside, which creates a spark. About face. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover. Hard. About face. We're going to keep ours short and sweet, since we are here at a Civil War park. But I appreciate everyone coming out today. And if you have any questions, please make your way through all the demonstrations and ask anything you want. Thank you.
Why did they wouldn't shoot?
There comes another one.
How y'all doing? I represent the typical soldier, Spanish-American War, Indian Wars as well. I went into Cuba in 1898. We fought against Spain for 3 months in the summer. For Cuba, Puerto Rico, Philippines, also took Wake and Guam. Yeah, we're still wearing blue wool in the jungles, comfortable. The typical weapon that the units carried was this, original 45-70. It's a 1884 model, trapdoor. Now the Spanish were using one of the best rifles ever made, a bolt-action Mauser, smokeless. They were a little advanced. And some of the regulars for the United States were carrying a Krag, a bolt-action. The vast majority of troops were carrying this. And there's some advances from the Civil War. No ramrod, breech loading, and it takes a bullet.
Watch it, yeah.
There. Now, what's similar to the past rifles, it's still black powder. Messy, stinky, and you can be seen when it fires. So the Spanish usually waited until we fired and then poured ammunition into us. So I represented a soldier from the Michigan 33rd who took the first actions in Cuba, took heavy casualties throughout the war in the defense of the San Juan Heights. And since I only have a 3-month war, they don't let me talk much longer. I also don't have any fancy firing stuff. We just fired when fired upon. So I'm also going to fire a couple shots to show you how much quicker we can do this.
Watch out, Abigail.
And usually we'd fire about 3 or 4 rounds, and then it's hot and you can't fire anymore. So, but That's all I have for 3 months of 1898.
Come out of the trenches in France. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Major General George Duncan, commander of the 82nd Infantry Division, welcome you here today. My name is Corporal Dave Weiss, out of Alabama, 325th Infantry Regiment. We're in a different war in France. We're in a war that we've never seen in the history of mankind. We're involved with our British and French allies to fight the Germans and their allies and push them, the Germans, back to Berlin and whip Kaiser Bell. Our allies have been fighting in France for the last 3 years, going on 4 years. Millions have died in this war to end all wars. Some things have changed since my grandfather and my father fought, for example, in Cuba. The man that just left you, that generation. Warfare is changing. As you can see similarities, he's wearing blue wool. My uniform is also wool, but we have changed now to the olive drab uniform. As you can see, changes in technology and warfare. Now millions are being killed with machine guns, long-range artillery, and also gas warfare. Things are changing. On my head, I'm wearing the model 1917 helmet, based on the British pattern, our ally. On my chest, I'm now wearing a gas mask to protect me during a gas attack because of changes in warfare. This is a small box respirator based on the British pattern. Our allies, the British, have helped us tremendously. I'm carrying the M1903 Springfield rifle, 30 caliber. It will kill at 1,000 yards. On the end of my rifle, I'm carrying the M1905 bayonet, 16 inch, to put through the gut of the German. The more we kill of them, the sooner we can go home. My father had to fight with a breech loading rifle. I now have a bolt action rifle based on the German Mauser pattern. We learned from the Spanish-American War that we need to change our rifle and make it more easy of use and quicker to fire, be more effective. General John Blackjack Pershing, our commander in France, has ordered that his soldiers will be marksmen. They will have effective rifle fire on the enemy, unlike our French and British allies, who are depending on artillery to break through the stalemate of trench warfare on the Western Front. I fire 5-round clips.
Watch on her.
I can fire 5 rounds, one right after the other, as quickly as I can work my bolt. So again, our technology is changing where we can fire much faster and more accurately with this rifle. Simply, sometimes simply, load 5 rounds into my magazine, and I'm ready to fire. 5 aimed shots, per General Pershing's order.
Watch on her. Here goes. He's getting ready to shoot.
Again, warfare is changing, technology is changing. We will not come back until it's over. Over there. Thank you.
I'm tired.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm tired.
December the 7th, 1941, was the surprise attack by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. The United States officially entered World War II. I say officially because the war had been going on for many years before that occurred. Now today we're known as a world power. Our military is one of the best, if not the best, in the world. But we just got through with World War I. Remember? The war to end all wars? And our military has been downsized. So officially, go back to 1938, our military, as far as infantry, was ranked right behind a country called Romania. So you see we had a lot of catching up to do. But the one thing that we did have, that none of the other militaries had, that we were going to be fighting against, the Axis, the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians. We had a gentleman who invented the M1 Garand. This is a Bible that I want a lot of you here today. Weapon is durable. Throw it in the mud, rain, and you're still going to have the action. It's going to fire. It's dependable. What our troops need. But the main thing was the first semi-automatic weapon that was introduced in the military. A semi-automatic I'm talking about is once I've loaded with an 8-round clip, every time I pull the trigger, it's going to fire. I don't have to do smoke action anymore. Now, how does that help me? Well, it means when I'm aiming down the sight, I don't have to reacquire what I'm trying to shoot at. It's still there. And I can keep putting rounds down range where they need to go. It's such a good weapon that you're going to find it was actually the longest serving battle rifle up until the M16. It served in World War II. It also served in the Korean War. Variations of it served in the Vietnam War in the earlier portion. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of a demonstration of it. The clip, it's a Springer clip type. I've got 8 rounds in it. And the one thing you're going to find out is you're going to put it into the magazine. You're going to load it with your thumb. Now this is called the Garand thumb. It's called the Garand thumb because Garand Force is the one who invented it. But if you don't get your thumb out of the way, when I do this, it's going to turn black and blue. It's going to throb real bad. So once it's loaded, let's see if I can do it. Oh, it's ready to go. Every time I pull the trigger, it's going to fire for those 8 rounds. Now at the end of those 8 rounds, that clip's got to go somewhere. So it's going to pop out of the top of it. Now the one thing, if you're in close combat, that might do, if there's a hard surface down here, it makes a pinging sound. Now the Germans actually knew that. So they would hear that pinging sound, they would say, he's empty. I can shoot at him now. Come around the corner. Now we're kind of bright too. So I'm a GI, I'm saying with a little extra clip in my pocket that's empty. Throw it on the ground, make that little pinging sound, but I still got ammunition in my rifle. So you got to do what you got to do. But if you listen, you might hear a little bit of that pinging sound when I do the demonstration.
Watch out, here it goes.
Blanket adapter is not working. That's a little sound. It should have fired every time I pulled the trigger, but I'm blanket adapter
Oh, hello. I'm Staff Sergeant Butler. I'm with the 2nd Division, 9th Regiment in Korea. This is September the 17th, 1950. And our unit has been pushed all the way to what we call the Tucson perimeter. The only thing that the Americans have control over is like a 25 to 35 mile radius. But I hear that General Arthur has just landed with several divisions, with Marines, and so we're going to beat our way out of this. Now I was in Fort Lewis, Washington, just a little over 2 months ago, getting ready to be discharged. I joined at the end of World War II. When the war comes, It was June 25th, 1950. I remember that morning we were told that 8 divisions of North Korea had come across the border. And 3 days later, they was in Seoul, Korea. July the 10th is when my unit started mobilizing. And so here we are, getting ready to take that field, Field 201, and we're going north of the 30th Carol. Same weapon I had when I was in World War II. So I was a little familiar with it. And one accurate shot, I'm glad they gave it back to me. Brand new boots I had, double bumper boots. So we'll be wearing them until they decide what type of uniform they want for Korea. Same way that works, pull the bolt back. Got an 8-round clip. Clip. And I'm going to shoot that heel. Thank you.
Soldier from the Vietnam era, which ran from 1965 up to 1975, which was Saigon, Africa. Notice on the other soldiers, a lot of them were wearing wool. Since it was a hot tropical climate, the U.S. went to a lighter cotton-based uniform from then on. And then most of the time, the soldiers were armed with an M16A1, which shoots a 5.56 round, and it had a 20-round box magazine on it. They would normally only load about 18 rounds in the magazine on it. Simply because of the jam that they did for spring in the magazine would wear out. The unit that I represent fought mainly south of Saigon in the swamps and the rivers down in the southern part of the country. Faster than the other ones, and it also had a fully automatic capability on it. When they were first issued, they had a lot of problems out of them simply because they were told that they didn't need to clean their weapons after they got done fighting. So that caused a lot of jams in them, and they always thought that they were bad weapons. They ended up being one version or another. Once they were issued cleaning kits and instructed on how to clean them, started working out a lot better.
To 1991, Operations Desert Storm, Desert Shield. We are the best trained army the world has ever seen. We are the best trained army this nation has ever seen. Our nation has called us again to go across the world and to repel Iraqi forces from Kuwait. I can guarantee you we are ready. We are ready to do this anytime, any day. We are an army of destruction. We have the best equipment, like I said. We have the deadliest equipment. We have equipment that I don't even understand. But one thing that I do know, the basic element of a rifleman is his rifle. Dating back from the Vietnam era, the M16 rifle family has been part of the United States Army for a long time. This is the M16A2. It's a little bit upgraded. Has a little bit stronger barrel, a little bit better stock. The sighting's better. The forward assist helps the soldier in case of a jam. The magazine-fed weapon, just like the A1, 30-round capacity. Select 5.
I represent the modern war on terrorism, circa September 11, 2001, to a date to be determined. I'm here to finish a job that those guys didn't do 10 years ago. A couple of changes, folks. First of all, our rifle's a little bit shorter. M16A4 carbine. A little bit shorter, means the distance is a little bit less, about 50 meters less accurate as far as distance. You can't reach out and touch anyone quite as far as the M16A12, but you don't have to. It's close quarter combat fighting, a lot of urban fighting, so that's why we want the shorter rifle. Weighs about 1.3 pounds less, fully loaded than the predecessor, but much more maneuverable, especially if you're getting in and out of vehicles. You'll also notice that we've got body armor, an outer tactical vest, which is designed to stop a 9mm round. The cloth portion is. Inside the vest, you've got what's called a small arms protective insert, SAPI plate, the ceramic plate, and they're designed to stop the old Soviet-style AK-47s. I think most of us are familiar with the AK-47s. You see them in movies all the time on TV. So they're designed, in theory, to stop one of those rounds. I've yet to test it. Hopefully I never will. So, these are the major changes to the uniform that you see. Also a significant change from previous wars, as you saw, is that we no longer have rank and file. We don't need them. The American soldier today, most of them anyway, soldiers, Marines, airmen, and so forth, they are a product of 9/11. They grew up in that environment, war and terror. They joined the service knowing that they would be serving overseas in most instances. It's a different mindset. They don't need to be told, dress right, dress. They don't need to be told to lock and load. When they leave the compound, their weapon is already loaded and there's a round in the chamber. That's what the weapon is. It's on safe, and your finger is just one short slick switch away. So when you're ready to shoot, you flip, you shoot. Real easy. Now, these soldiers have a lot more flexibility, a lot more decision making than previous generations. So what we do is when they go outside the wire, so to speak, they have what's called rules of engagement. And essentially, the first rule of engagement is self-defense. Everyone has the right to self-defense, or to defend others, or to defend property that is critical to the United States government, such as encrypted radios and so on and so forth. So these rules of engagement are very important because they're the operating parameters in which our modern soldiers use to fight. So when they see a threat, real or perceived, they're allowed to engage that target and use whatever force is necessary to remove that threat. And with that being said, they're very effective for what they do. They're very well trained. They have a lot of independent thought, a lot of independent movement, and by far, these are the best soldiers we've ever produced. So what I'm going to do now is give you a short demonstration, and unlike the previous war, I'm going to simulate 2 misfires to show you how fast we can recover from a misfire. Unlike the previous generations, specifically the muzzle loaders, if that weapon misfired, they were pretty much out of luck. You don't have time on the battlefield to extract the ball and reload it. But with these weapons, it's real quick, real easy. Misfire! And that concludes my demonstration.
Oh yeah, we gotta scoot back this way a little bit.
Quickest time, load and fire. Ladies and gentlemen, they are all volunteering for us this weekend. They come from all different backgrounds, representing all these different eras. Please give them a wonderful applause.